But I don't know to the extent to which the students are aware of your backgrounds. I know about Mr. Passarella a little bit here in your history, but maybe you could just say a few words about your background in Trenton and
I'll be very happy to do that.
maybe your growing up years and how they influenced your career.
Both of us are natives. Well, actually, Gil was born in New York, but grew up, was educated in Trenton, as I was, born in Trenton, in the Chambersburg section of Trenton. Some of you may be aware of that. It was basically an ethnic Italian neighborhood. So the arts were very alive during that time period when I was very young. Of course, we only had a choice of the violin or the guitar or the accordion. So if you wanted to study music, you chose one of those three instruments. But I went to the Trenton Public Schools. We had a very vibrant, viable music program throughout K through 12. And I'm a graduate of this facility in music, both bachelor's and master's degree. And Trenton, throughout that, my early time, and Gil also, we had many, many opportunities to participate in the arts. Unfortunately, that has changed. Funding has changed, and there have been a number of other roadblocks that have not allowed the same opportunities to prevail today. So things have changed, and that's why you should be asking some questions, how they have changed. So I'll leave Mr. Gill to give you a little bit about his background.
Well, I guess I come from a little different direction because I didn't have a formal education, never went to college, never got a degree. Back when I was growing up, not everyone went to college. It was an industrial city. A lot of our parents worked in industry, and it was a thing, graduated from high school, and you went to work. But the school system were so great as far as like the way I got involved in music. When I was going to school, you played, they call middle schools, and back then in Trenton they were called junior high schools. You had you could learn to play an instrument. They had music for you. And back then, what really, we talk about what nurtured music was the fact that people, whenever they had music, they had to have live, it had to be live music. You didn't have all the different technology you have today. So we would play in the school band, but then there were opportunities to play outside of the schools. That's what I see now. I think a lot of the students, they play in school, and that's the only place they stay, playing there. So, but for me, what I learned in the Trent school system, the music we had to play, and then there were organizations outside of the schools, like the sponsored bands, like the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the American Legion. There was a youth orchestra, and you went to play onto them. And back then, the music we played the music that was being played by the professionals. It wasn't made so that it was easy for students to play. And it set you up so you were able to, even if you just with my background in education, in graduating from high school, I was already prepared to go out and play professionally. And as a result, I ended up playing in the Trenton Symphony, several orchestras, a lot of show. There used to be in the Lambertville Music Circus. They used to do musicals every summer. They brought in Nate Max, which set me up for Atlantic City eventually. Then I ended up playing the casinos. Now, going there, when casino gambling first opened, musicians were going there from all over the country because they thought it was great in Las Vegas. But some of the musicians down there were amazed at, with all the people going to trying to find the few jobs there were, how many musicians were in almost every casino from the Trenton area. I would be asked, what is Trenton like? We never met so many Trenton musicians. What was it like? How were the schools? How did you learn? How was it set up? And some prominent people came through the Trenton school system. Bill Holcomb, who was a pretty well-known composer, arranger. He did things for movies. There was a George Romanis. People don't know who he is now, but he did things for movies. He did things for television series. And all this came out of the Trenton school system. So it served us well. I did very well without, fortunately, I wish I had a college education, but I did very well without it musically.
Well, actually, Professor Napper would appreciate this. When we auditioned for entrance to Trenton State College at the time, if we came out of Trenton High School, you actually did not have to take the first 2 years of theory or harmony. You were just way above that already. It was amazing, the preparation that we had. We had 3 levels. We had music theory, and then we had harmony 1 and 2, and we were doing Bach conventions by the time we got to theory 3, harmony 3. I mean, we were just doing so much more than they were doing here as a first semester college students. So we had the opportunities, but you know, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And there were many opportunities during those days for us to go out as young, 15, 16 years old, to go out and play. Because every corner establishment, bar, had live music. As Gil said, you know, live music, there was no technology, so if you wanted music, it was live music. So we all had opportunities to go out and play. And we all were, I was out, he was out, 15, 16 years old, playing in the bars. And that's what we did on the weekends, while we were still in school. And unfortunately, things have changed. You know, you're well aware of DJs and playing records and CDs and MP3 files. And that has done a lot of live music. And a lot of these things, when you go out and you see these one-man bands have all these tracks and these keyboards, they're not really playing. They're tracks, and they're just singing, they're playing a line over those tracks. So that eliminated a lot of work for musicians. So the opportunities are not there as they were. But there were so many fine musicians that came out of Trenton at one point in time. And up through into the 80s. A couple of the guys in Cool in the Gang. 2 of the guys in Cool in the Gang now are Trenton students. Curtis Pulliam and Michael Ray in Cool in the Gang. Of course, the late Clifford Adams, who was Cool in the Gang forever, and another, you know, Trenton high school graduate. Instant Funk. I've Got My Mind Made Up. It's an old tune you're probably not aware of, but they sold millions of copies. They were from Trenton. You see Sarah Dash up there, Patti LaBelle, the Bluebells. There was all these people related to Trenton. So it was a very vibrant city. We had Broadway shows coming in who would come to Trenton first before they go to New York. The Old Palace Theater in Trenton was a stop for them. We had there were any number of venues for shows. As I said to Professor Pearson, even minstrel shows back in those days. So there was a lot going on in Trenton. I wish you had some good questions for us, and probably.
Well, go ahead, just raise your hand.
Yes.
I mean, other than your formal education in Trenton schools, did you have, or at least did your family have a musical background?
My father played wax, paper, and comb. Exactly. So that would be the answer. No. But in the community, and as in anywhere, the churches had music, but the schools provided the opportunity to participate. We had orchestras and bands, and that was kind of where we all got our start. Yes?
What were some of your musical inspirations before you became a musician?
Before I became a musician?
Or
Well, as I said, Gil could probably answer this differently, but I heard in the community, you know, because it was an Italian community, you heard a lot of accordions. That's just the way it was. So, I mean, you heard it and you said, okay, I think I like that, and that's what I want to do. So that's what I studied. So my first inspiration came from the community.
What neighborhood?
Chambersburg section of Trenton, which was an Italian, you know, ghetto. That's what it was.
Now, my inspiration came a little differently is, for some reason, I remember being, I guess, very, very young, in the mornings, my mother always had the radio on listening to music. And I guess that just, and then there used to be when I was younger, it's a lifetime ago, a lot of the movies had musicals, and I used to love to see the musicals. So there was something in me that I just liked music. And I had an older brother, and somewhere along the way he had an old bugle. And I used to remember I used to go down on my own just blow the bugle, you know, just because I like to play. So when I went to what we'll call middle school, the teacher came around and asked who wanted to be in the band, orchestra. I said I want to play trombone. Now people ask me why I picked the trombone. And that's a funny story because it was like a teenage girl in my neighborhood who I had a crush on. I must have been like 7, 8 years old, and she took me to see a musical and the trombone player, and she said, "I love him." I guess that inspired me. But
Good start.
but then the teacher took me to the room, gave me the trombone, and she asked me to play a note, and I played it. Then she asked me to play 2 more notes, and I played that. And she looked at me. She says, "You played before trombone?" I said, "No." She said, "Who taught you how to play?" And I said, "Because when I was younger, I used to go out and play the bugle." So I guess it came more easy to me.
Not a legitimate instrument, though. Could not get into Trenton State College on the bugle.
No.
Actually, when I came to audition, they said, "What do you play?" I said, "The accordion." They said, "What?" I said, "That's what I play." I said, "No, go back and learn the piano, and then come back to see us again." So that's how I got into Trenton State.
How is it interacting with people outside of your neighborhood in Trenton? Did music play any part in that?
Oh, it gave you opportunities to interact with the folks across the, young kids across the city had youth bands, youth orchestras. The city recreation department had a program during the summer for a youth band. So yes, it did give us opportunities to interact with people from all across the city.
What time
Races,
frame?
religions, etc.
What time frame is this?
For me, I graduated from high school in '61, so do the math.
See, for many years, the Trenton Symphony was the school system were pretty much a feature for the musicians who eventually came into the Trenton Symphony and orchestras like that. So that was a good thing. And that's things started to change with the cuts in funding and everything. That sort of stopped, and they had to import musicians from other areas, especially in the strings, with the strings.
I think you all realize how visual music has become. It's not just oral. I mean, now it has to be the show, the fireworks, the lights, the whatever. It's not just listening to music. That's a discrete skill that you have to develop. But unfortunately today it's about entertainment, not so much about the music.
There used to be a time when if you could be a singer, of course, like Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett, singers like that, you used to be able to go out with an orchestra behind them, wearing a tuxedo, and sing, and it was fine. And television made it more visual, and Elvis Presley came along with his dancing and whatever he does and changed everything. Then you couldn't just be a singer. You had to put on the show. So tastes, public tastes, a lot of times shape what happens in music.
Students have read Jack Washington's Quest for Equality about Trenton from 1819 to 1965. And in the 1950s, it suggests that there were a lot of issues in the city, lots of concerns about gangs, poverty, neighborhood tensions, and there was a whole debate about what's the best way to deal with some of those issues. Do you remember those kinds of issues coming up
Sure.
during your youth?
Absolutely.
And did the arts, some of the arts and recreation programs that you're talking about, did you see that as?
That was very beneficial because, again, it gave us exposure to other folks from across the city. Black, white, Asian, Jewish, Italian, Polish. Yes, and you have to celebrate differences in people, not just tolerate. So when you interact with those folks, you learn something new. And yes, there was tension. Of course, there was more tension in the 60s. I was teaching at the time when the riots, both in 67 and 60, I think it's 68 or 69. Yeah, 68, yes. And again in 70, actually. That was a tough time in Trenton. And in fact, I was teaching junior high school, and the high school band program had a great person there in charge of the program, but minority recruitment was very low, both Spanish or black. And they needed someone young to go to the high school as the band director. I did not want to go. And I was sent there in '70 for that reason, because I could relate more. I was younger, I could relate more to the young kids today at that particular time. And of course, the program changed radically in the '70s, and we welcomed more of those students that were not formally trained, but had a lot of talent. And I'd find them walking around in the hallways, you know, a guitar player or a drummer, whatever. As a matter of fact, Curtis Pulliam, who was with Kool and the Gang, we'll go back to that story. He came to me as a, I guess in 10th grade, he said he wanted to be in the band. I said, what do you play? He said, I play drums. I said, kid, we have 3,000 drummers. I need something. I need like a trumpet player or something. He said, well, I don't play trumpet. I said, well, here's a trumpet, go learn it, basically. And he came back, amazing talent, within weeks, playing very well. And today he makes a living playing trumpet. But there were those opportunities back then, and they don't exist so much now. And Trenton had a great music program at one point in time. I retired there as a director of the arts program for the city. But funding issues, and the state came in and changed some things, and went into something called site-based management, where principals were allowed to make decisions in staffing. And if they didn't feel, a particular principal didn't feel that arts were important, they would trade an art teacher for 2 security guards, or another custodian, or a cafeteria worker, or whatever they thought was important, because they were then in charge. So it did change what Trenton had to offer, and has not yet recovered to this day. They're trying to get back to that point. They have not gotten there yet. So money talks, definitely.
Next question.
May I add something to about the gangs at that period of time? There was a time, just around that time, the Trenton Symphony, what they would do is, with a smaller orchestra, go around to elementary, some middle schools, and it was all paid for. The music was paid for by the musicians' union, and for a while they didn't go into the areas where the gangs were, but then one year we did, and some of the musicians had never been exposed to that type of environment, and they were like, you see, they were a little leery, but the kids were great, and the musicians were very impressed with the receptions they received from those kids. So that's something like that. I thought it was huge, changing perceptions.
Well, Trenton was segregated at one point in time. I mean, it was the old Lincoln School, which, you know, they became junior high school number 5, now called Rivera School. That was a totally black school. And in the 40s, in Trenton, junior high school number 2 became Hedgepeth Williams School eventually, because there was a lawsuit to integrate the school. So Trenton did have, there was a lot of tension, but not so much in the 50s. I mean, there was some of it. But it really, like I said, the riots in the late 60s and then 70 really turned that city in a whole different direction. So really affected it.
And more recently, a few years back, Joseph Pucciotti, who teaches music at Trenton High still, he asked me to do a presentation on playing the trombone for his music students. And you know, people, you know, you see what you see in the newspapers about this Trenton High and his students, gangs, and everything. And I went there, and what I did, those students were so great. The next day I told all my friends, I said, look, you know, whatever you read about, those, whatever groups, you don't see these types of kids. You're not familiar with them, and they're great. So, you know, perceptions, music, hopefully music could, in that way, can change perceptions between the different groups. Very much so.
Yes.
What kept you close to Trenton? 'Cause, I mean, coming from like a college perspective and like having older siblings, when we get jobs, you know, we try and go to big cities, whether it be New York or
Yeah,
Philadelphia.
we didn't even think about that at the one time. That was just a different time. Your family was there, you stayed there. You know, I got out of college and I got an offer of a job in Trenton, which was great, you know. So I stayed there. I could have, I guess, gone on. My brother took a whole different route. He left the country, never came back. He was 6 years younger, just a different mindset. And he's still away.
There are quite a few local musicians who, even though they may live here, a lot of their music, when they play, most of them play in Philadelphia. There's some New York, a lot of them in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And like I said, at one time, down in Atlantic City, and maybe talk about playing elsewhere, like say, talk about going on the road when you're young. Everyone thinks that's the greatest thing, going on the road. It's very glamorous. But the reality of it is, because I was asked quite a few times to go with groups on the road, but then I'm too practical. Because I was thinking, okay, this tour is going to be 6 months, then what? Where am I? You know, and it's fun, but
Yeah, we all work outside of Trenton. There's not that much work in Trenton.
no.
I work in Philly quite a bit.
Anymore.
So, you say Trenton, it's really the area.
Thank you so much. Sorry that I have to.
So if you graduated from high school in '61,
Mhm.
then you would have been a contemporary of people like Nona Hendricks and Sarah Dash?
A little older than them, yes. Yeah, yes, I'm older.
Do you have any memory of them?
No.
No.
No, I know them now. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, as adults, but not
Right.
as a student. you know.
Right, okay. I was wondering of whether you remember what it was like when they had their first hits with Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells.
No, I remember more about, you know, the Instant Funk group, because they were all
Okay.
students there, and Clifford, of course, was there.
Okay, then tell us about that.
Um,
And they do know who Instant Funk is, by the way.
They do?
Yeah.
They do, really?
Yeah.
Great band. Instant Funk was a bunch of Trenton kids who got together and started a little group, and they pursued it. They had a lot of opportunities to play. Clifford Adams was, he wasn't really a part of Instant Funk, but he was part of that same group of students. He was a little bit older than they were. Actually, Gil has a good story to tell you about. You know who Clifford Adams is? Any of you know who he is? Okay. Gil, share that story about the trombone. It's a good story. I told you about this story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Clifford. I think it was back in 1966. I had a trombone stolen from my car. And at that time, I never really taught privately, but I was teaching one young kid who was a friend of mine, he's a cousin. And he was in Trenton High, just started Trenton High, and he called me up maybe 6 months later. He said, I know who has your trombone. I said, who? He says, it's a student, you know. And I said, well, how do you know it's my instrument? They said the same case. I said, well, they made thousands of those cases. So the teacher calls me, and he says, from what I understand, the student here may have your instrument. I said, well, I don't know. I said, I don't want the kid to get in trouble if it isn't, you know, because it was right after the riots, and there's a lot of tension going on. So he says, can you identify it? I said, well, yeah, there's one special mouthpiece that a friend of mine made, a trumpet player. I said, if it's in the case, it has to be mine. It's the only one in the world. So it's the one Clifford had. So when I went to the police station to pick up my instrument, I meet Clifford. And he's with his mother. And he's all down in the dumps. You know, oh, my trombone, my beautiful trombone. And I asked him, I said, well, what are you going to do? Does high school, Trenton High, do they have an instrument that they can lend you? They used to have them when I was there. He said they didn't have them. I said, okay, look, I have a trombone. It's the first one of my hat that my parents bought me. It's a little beat up, but I said, I'll see if someone can fix it. It can look good, you know, cheap. So I took it over his house, and you know, the brass, lose the brass instrument, the lacquer goes, you know, there's no more lacquer on it, they almost turn green from the brass. And he looked at the instrument and went, oh, geez, you know. I said, look, I said, I'm giving you this horn. My parents worked hard to get this horn for me. So his father says he'll take it. So I said, okay. I said, there's only one deal. You know, Clifford, you know, being the typical teenager, you're an adult, Tom. Here's a deal here. Yeah, well, okay. No. I don't want an attitude. I don't want to hear that 6 months from now you're not playing anymore. Well, he did more than just play it. He did great with it. And the thing is, years later, I felt very good because he always told everyone the story how I gave him the horn. And Clifford and I remained friends until he died.
Great guy. Do you have internet access here in the classroom?
Mm-hmm.
You guys want to look up Dennis Richardson. That's a name that's not really mentioned very often. Young student from Trenton. He passed at a very early age. But what he accomplished in Philadelphia with that Philadelphia sound, and the groups that he played with, Evelyn Champagne King, OJs, et cetera, played and wrote for. So a lot of these students from Trenton went to Philly and were involved with the studio there. Bunny Sigler?
Bunny Sigler.
Yeah, Bunny Sigler. That studio.
They read about him too.
Oh, they did? Well, see, they're well informed.
Can you go back, show the picture of Clifford playing the instrument?
Is that your trombone?
No. The instrument of mine that was stolen, he loved that instrument. For the rest of his life, he had to play on a King Silver 3B. That was it. From his first horn, that was it. He always told me about that. He said, oh, I have to play on a 3B. The King 3B.
So Dennis Richardson definitely should be mentioned. He's a phenomenal young player. Again, a Trenton high school student who did very well for himself.
You were saying about Instant Funk?
Yes. Instant Funk was just a group of Trenton high school students who got together. And again, see, it was the Philadelphia connection that made that group. I think that was Bunny Sigler too, I think.
Yeah, they came in last fall and spoke to the class.
Did Kim come in, the guitar player? Who came in?
Kim Miller, Kim and Scotty Miller.
Kim and Scotty
those
came in.
other gentlemen. I'll bring up the.
Well, Kim was just, I found Kim wandering around the hallways in Trenton High. He wasn't going to class, just wandering the hallways. And he wandered up to, at the high school, to the third floor. It was only 2 classrooms, 2 storage rooms, and 2 offices. It was just the music department. No one else went up there. If you weren't involved in music, you had no business going up there. And one day I saw him just hanging out in the hallway, cutting class, which he did every day. And I asked him who he was and what he did. And I said, do you play an instrument? You're up, this is the music room, floor. He said, no, I play guitar. I said, I'd like to hear you play guitar. And he came in and played guitar. And he got involved with the jazz band and whatever. And it really, I think, helped give him some direction, because he would have been lost. And he's a very fine player, also accomplished a lot in his lifetime. Oh, okay.
I don't have the soundboard.
Okay.
But that's them.
Yep. Tim and Scott. Scotty was a drummer. And Dennis Richardson was the piano player, keyboard player with this group.
I know you have more questions, because we practiced this.
I wish Tommy Grice were here. He would
Yeah.
definitely add to the conversation, I'll tell you that.
These two. Okay.
I know you said you played in like certain bars and in school and everything, but was there one like specific place that you first played at that was really special to you? Or, like,
No, not only special because it was the first one, but there was nothing really special about it. The money was not, I mean, back in those days, I think we were making $12 or $13 a night, which that's what you made. It was good money. So it was only special because I was underage And at that time, you had to have a special permit to play in the bar underage. I think it was an ABC card?
Yeah.
ABC card, yeah. Had to have.
Can you mention some of the venues?
They were all bars.
I know.
Want to mention that?
Yeah, part of what we've been doing is mapping some of these places.
There were a couple. There were the owners just featured jazz more than other clubs. So there was a place called Lanzie's, where I don't know if any of you know Richie Cole used to play there. And
Does that name mention Richie Cole at all? He's actually from Ewing, but
Ewing.
he's involved in Trenton.
Yeah.
And he was a regular there, but a lot of good musicians from Philadelphia. Well, we used to hang out there during the week. Musicians knew they could go in there, and during the week when he didn't have the owner didn't have music, he catered to us. But we'd go in there, and if the three guys came in, they were rhythm players, and piano, bass, and drums. We had our instruments with us. We would just get up and play. And there were a few places like that.
The Hendersons. They were jazz. These were the jazz clubs. He was referring to the jazz clubs.
Yeah.
The other places were just corner bars that had music.
Yeah, these were
Not
jazz.
particularly
These were jazz.
You know, the American songbook tunes, standard tunes. So, but there were 3 or 4 jazz places in Trenton. And Candlelight Lounge in Trenton is still going on.
Yeah.
That's still a jazz place. On Saturday afternoon, they still have 3 to 7. They still have jazz.
He mentioned a place called Hempson's Club 50, and on Sunday nights they had a top-notch local rhythm section, and they would bring in name players on Sunday nights. They had Clark Terry, Doc Severinsen, who was the Tonight Show. I don't know if you would remember a lot of these players, but the old legendary player Coleman Hawkins playing tenor sax, and like I said, it was fantastic. There was no cover, no minimum. And you heard the greatest jazz players in the history of jazz.
And the War Memorial Building also had featured, Louis Armstrong was there, Dave Brubeck was there. So the War Memorial had some, great players coming in. I'm going to share this with the professor. This is from 1932 or 3. Jimmy Lunsford Band was a little-known band. If you were a musician, you knew this band. It was an all-black band. Did not get the play that the other bands were getting. And the entrance fee here was for the concert was 95 cents. That's pretty cool. I'll share that with you. You can have that. Jimmy Lunsford Band.
Then there's an interview with Clifford Adams where he talks about meeting Gene Ammons.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
At
The Jug, yeah.
Trenton.
Yeah. Yeah, well, all the musicians came. Trenton was a venue. All the players, as Gil said, they would come to Trenton to play.
Yeah.
It was appreciated. We had good crowds, good audiences.
One night in this, where I was talking about Henderson's, there was one of the best tenor sax players they're doing it. There's Al Cohn, and he was talking to just another musician who was sitting in the bar, and I overheard him say that the musicians in Trenton are highly regarded in New York City.
Indeed.
So they were here.
And that, again, because there was opportunity to
That's the whole thing.
participate
That's
at an early age, and we had a great program in the schools. Great program. As I said, that has changed.
Did you think that you were, most of the students that you had weren't going to become professional musicians.
Correct.
So what was it that you saw yourself accomplishing, and how did you come to a conclusion that some student might, a particular student might be
Drive,
worth
their
encouraging?
drive, their intensity. They would harass me all day long for information. Always looking for an opportunity to play. Always cutting class to come up to the 3rd floor to hang out and play music. You could tell where they were going with the music, definitely.
The one
And
time,
their talent, obviously, their talent.
I had mentioned earlier when I was teacher just put you out in Trenton, I asked me to do a presentation, and the kids were very good questions, and a couple days later, the next teacher was there, and he came up to me, so I thought he'd like to hear this. I said, "What's that?" there was a young trombonist in there who was ready to give up. I saw him. He said, but you inspired him to work harder at it. So, you know,
Sometimes it just takes a little bit of a push.
That's all it takes.
And a good teacher is, you don't teach at the child. You work with the child. I always say, I learned as much from those kids as they learned from me. Maybe I learned more. Because I was open, and they would do something on a guitar or a piano or a key, whatever. They didn't know they couldn't do that it was difficult to do. They just did it. So I learned as much from them, I'm sure, as they learned from me. So
See, I
it was a mutual exchange.
I always refer to it as the hook.
The
There's
hook,
always
right.
something that will get the kid. You just have to find the hook. How do you present it to him? Or her, I say, the student. And most of them have it, I think. In anything, whatever you're studying, there's the hook.
And music kept them out of trouble also, I can tell you that, because it kept them engaged. Music is very interesting. You learn one note, and the other kid next to you knows two notes. Now you want to know two more notes. And it just keeps you going. Kim is a good example. Kim would have been out in the streets doing something bad, I'm sure. But instead, music took him in a whole different direction. Gave him something, a sense of self-worth.
And if you want to talk about opportunities, I'm a good example of that. The time I graduated from Trenton High, I didn't know whether I was ever going to play again. And if you asked me then whether I'd still be playing this many years later, I would have said, no, it's not going to happen. But I stuck with it, and I started to buy method books. As I said, I studied privately like them for a long time. But then the opportunities were there. There were just so many more places to play, so many different types of music to play. It was all there if you wanted to do it.
It comes back to opportunity.
Yes, it does. There's something. There's a goal.
The venues were there.
Yes. Got to be something to play for.
Yes.
You talked about Trenton music program being all over music. What needs to change in order to improve that and make it effective?
Monies have to be available, and those who are making decisions have to be aware of the importance of the arts. Those two things have to change. And I think it's starting to change, but unfortunately, as I said, they went to something called site-based management. And I had a budget of millions of dollars. I can bring in residencies, I can bring in programs, I can do a lot of things. I can buy instruments, I could provide for transportation, for concerts, or whatever. When they went to site-based management, as I said, they gave that power to the principals. So money is power. If you have no money, you have no power. So once they took that away from me, and they gave it to the principals made other decisions. So the program, it's like the federal government. You have to have something structuring the states. Well, they gave it so every school had its own thing. And it just completely destroyed the integrity of not just music, dance, drama, visual arts, etc. And they're now just starting to realize again how important it is to the development of the child. So hopefully it will change.
There's another aspect to all this, though, also, is that we've been talking about the performance end of it. But for music to succeed, there's a listening part of it. And I don't know whether, in school, maybe it starts there. The type of music, the availability of the different types of music that are there for you to listen to. Everything's marketed because it's money drives everything. Mm-hmm. If you try to find any kind of music you may like, you may not, unless you see it live, you're not going to hear it anyplace. And I don't know whether how they teach it in school, that part of it. I know when I was in middle school, they had music class, I was doing instrumental. The other students went to music class. Now, I don't know what they were really learning there. I guess they were being taught the different types of music that existed, how to listen to it, the value of it. I don't know. But we need people to want to listen to live music. That's another part of it. Like one drives the other, which puts the chicken to the egg.
It's all part of the educational process.
Yes,
if you have
it is.
a good teacher, it exposes the child to a variety of music, different kinds of music, or anything of the arts. you have an opportunity to say, yes, I like it, or no, I don't like it. But if you're never exposed to it, you have no idea. And unfortunately, all of you do, I'm sure you do the same thing. You know what you like, you put it on, you put your earbuds in and you listen to it, and that's the end of it. You don't often try to experiment and explore other kinds of music, and you really should. You might find something you like.
Are any of you familiar with this, he was a singer, Mel Torme? Did you ever hear of him? Any of you? Oh, well, he was a very fine singer at one time, and very well known. And I was telling him about an incident that occurred. I was playing it after a concert, and jazz, but there was a little girl, she must have been like around 8, 9 years old, sitting in front of us. She was totally enthralled with what we were doing. I'm thinking, why is she so interested? So then she asked, she said, well, will you play something if I ask for it? I don't know. So at that time, there was a song called Unforgettable. That was recorded. She said, can you play Unforgettable? I said, wow, a little girl like that, thinking of a song like that, I would think something rock, right? But this Mel Torme, I was telling him a story. I worked with him one time, and he was saying it's amazing. He said, if you give young people the opportunity to hear more types of music than they have availability to, the good choices they will make.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's lacking. I mean, for example, like in a different way, the office, when we go for coffee in the morning, or most of our friends, they're Italian. Now, if I mentioned Italian opera, one guy told me one thing, oh, who wants to hear that garbage? The garbage that you're heritage. But he didn't grow up with that. You know, he's totally unfamiliar with it.
You have to be exposed to it.
You know, so that's the thing. You know, well, if you listen to it, maybe you would like some of it. But they don't have that opportunity.
Let me ask you about a couple of other prominent musicians from Trenton. You mentioned Italian opera. Did you know Richard Crooks? Do you know who that is?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Can you talk a little bit about him?
No, no, I just know who he
Yeah,
is, but I
exactly.
Okay, well, he was an opera singer,
Yeah.
and they had to listen to.
We had Paul Ropes in school in Trenton, obviously, who did an awful lot in this area.
Yeah, he was from the area.
Exactly.
Yeah. Up on the screen is part of the video that we shot with Diane Jones.
Yes, Diane was a student also when I was in high school.
But I was wondering if you could say a bit about her.
A tremendously talented young lady, went on to do very well for herself and is still singing, and a beautiful person,
Yeah.
absolutely beautiful person. But very, very talented.
She sang.
Good student.
Sang backup for Taylor Dane and,
Mhm.
and Guns N' Roses.
Yep.
But started off singing at a Russian restaurant, singing in Russian.
I was just going to ask you that.
Yeah. There's in part of this video clip she sings. We got her to sing in Russian.
How about that?
That's how she met Taylor Dane.
How about that?
And,
It's great.
yeah, tells some very funny stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's that same group, there must have been something in the water in those years.
Yeah.
Really, they're all about the same age.
And-
They all came out together.
That's actually part of what fascinated me and stimulated me to think about this project, because I was trying to understand what was going on at that time.
But don't forget the churches too. What
Oh,
opportunity they
that's
have
a
to play
big
in the
thing,
churches.
that's a big thing.
You know, there's a lot of that going on
That's a
also.
big thing, church, the influence of church
Absolutely.
in music.
So they got a lot of their training in church. They sang in the choir.
Did you know some of the rock musicians that came out?
They're Van Eaton brothers that came out of Trenton,
Uh-huh.
Trenton High School. You might want to look those up. They did quite a bit of work. Lonnie Van Eaton and his brother. You should probably note them in your archive. And some folks who went to New York, Kirk Newrock, remember Kirk?
Yeah.
Kirk Newrock, he went to New York and still in New York, did a lot of writing. Mickey Rossi.
Mickey Rossi.
Mickey Rossi is from Trenton. He was the associate director of
Les Miserables.
Yep,
And he conducted on the National Touring Company.
yep, and he's now with Philip Glass, composer. Awful lot of musicians came out of Trenton.
And with the one time I mentioned before, Bill Holcomb, who was in another era, I was over his house one day and got a phone call from the composer who wrote the music for the movie Rocky, and he called him because he was doing some performing at some of his work. I was very impressed with the work he did.
Did you work with any of them?
No, they were students. They were students. Actually, I actually subbed at the high school and they were students. They graduated with my brother. My brother was very close with them. They did quite a bit outside of Trenton.
We also, names of the, well, we had to listen to a presentation from Dave Hart. You familiar with him?
No.
Okay, he's something of a musician, but a historian, and anyway, but he gave us a presentation last fall to the students about various musicians and in Trenton. It's also quoted in the book on City Garden.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so, and I know the students want to hear you talk about that.
Well, I can't say much about City Gardens because that was a little bit after my time. I mean, I know the building, I was in the building. That was a place for young music, punk rock and whatever. Great venue, from what I understand, but it's not someplace I frequented, I can tell you that.
One of the things that Dave Hart talks about was in 1985, a group of musicians came together and created a record for famine relief.
I don't remember that happening.
Okay.
No. Is he from the area?
Yeah.
Just don't know.
Trenton guy. He also talked about like Warren Mulhausen.
Oh, yeah, he was with Jim Croce.
Yeah.
Maury Marhausen, yes, he was a guitar player. He's from also from Trenton.
Yeah. Did you know him?
Not personally.
No.
But I heard them play live a number of times.
Yeah.
They were, unfortunately, I guess airplane accident, plane accident.
Right.
Yes.
How has music helped you overcome obstacles in your life?
I can tell you it's gotten me into trouble in my life. That's another story. I think it's learning how to understand a challenge and then meet that challenge and have the discipline. Music requires a heck of a lot of discipline. If you're not disciplined, you'll never make it. It requires intense practice. You're always thinking about music, how to make yourself better. So I would say if you're going to succeed in any art form, you have to have an awful lot of discipline. And that's will serve you well in other areas, other disciplines. And a passion. If you don't have the passion, game over. Gotta love it. Because you don't make money in the arts. Very rare. Yes.
You said before about music getting you in trouble. How is that?
I'm sorry?
You said before about music getting you in trouble. How's that?
No, I can't go there. That's nothing. That's
yeah.
nothing. Well, I'm saying, in
Yeah.
music, when you're out, in a sense, if you're out playing in the bars, and you're a musician, need I go further?
Okay, yeah.
So I can't get.
Well, the thing is, obviously, well, it's like life. The temptation is there. The availability, the different things to get in trouble.
I don't mean it in a bad
Yeah.
sense either. I just mean it's made life interesting.
Yes.
A few other people you might know. Grace Little.
Yes, she was at the high school, great singer. She was also a graduate of Trenton Central High School, and she's still singing and still sounding great.
Mike Carthen, you know him, bass player. Michael and Ralph Carthen.
Ralph Carthen, I know, yes.
Ralph-
Mike,
Ralph
that's her
is-
brother. Ralph's the drummer. He's the
Right.
drummer. I know Ralph. Ralph was a student of mine, yes. I don't remember Michael.
Okay. John Williams, Ray Richardson.
Ray Richardson, doing very well. Student, yes, doing very well. Was out on the road for a while, back in Trenton, playing very well.
Mike Gist.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Mike and Billy Gist.
Uh-huh.
Yes. How do you know these names?
That's what I was just
Yeah,
thinking.
you know more about it than I do.
Well, I explained this to the students. I went to college here in the 70s, and I knew Stanley Jordan.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I went to college with him. And
No one understood him when he was first playing.
Yeah.
Because he played at the Mill Hill in Trenton. They just kind of looked at him, who's this guy playing all this stuff? You know?
Yeah. And then his playing technique became something, the stuff that
Yes, indeed.
guitar magazines write about.
Exactly right, but no one understood it when he first started doing that.
Internationally respected.
Mhm.
So yeah, he and I went to college together.
Okay.
And then later.
You went to school here?
I went to Princeton.
Oh, Princeton, okay, that's what I thought,
Yeah,
yeah.
he was
So
a
you
freshman
student
when
at
I was a
Princeton,
senior at
right,
Princeton.
right.
And then, in more recent years, my daughter's a professional singer,
Okay,
and she's a Ewing High graduate.
okay,
So she's sung with another.
Okay.
So then I started hearing their stories.
I got
and
you.
thinking, holy cow, who knows about this?
there's so many young players out there that just did so well.
How about some of the more recent, hip-hop artists, people that, wise, intelligent, full righteous teachers?
I could not even begin to comment.
No?
No,
No,
I don't
you
know, I just don't know.
Okay.
Yes,
Were there any people in your life who opposed to your interest in music?
no, actually, not at all. My parents always encouraged me to, that's what I wanted to do, and my brother did the same thing. We just followed that path, and our parents gave us the support, and had the resources for us to study, privately or whatever. So I had to say no. I had met no obstacles whatsoever.
Now, I have to say yes, a conditional yes. I think I mentioned before, when I was asked if I wanted to be in a band, I saw the teacher, and she said, well, you have to get permission from your parents. So I went home, and I told my mother, and she said no, because I was a puny kid. She says, you're too small, you're not going to be able to play the instrument. She says, no, I don't think so. So I went back to school, and the teacher said, well, did you get permission? I said, yes. They said, yes. So I took the instrument.
That started his life in crime.
So I took the instrument home, and my mother worked, and she would call, when I got home from school. She said, so how is everything? I said, wait a minute. So I put the instrument together, and I blew it right into the horn. Blah! She said, so I was a little different. It wasn't a thing that my parents pushed on. In fact, she tried to dissuade me from doing it, but I wanted to do it. So I guess from an early age, music has always been just part of my life, listening and playing.
Yes.
Do you ever notice differences in people one-on-one versus when they're performing?
What kind of differences? Personality differences?
Yeah, personality, the way they hold themselves, present themselves.
It's pretty hard to hide your true self if you're a real musician or artist. I don't think I know any of them that are different as an individual or different as an individual playing or performing. Because it's part of you. You are what you are. And if you're a true artist, when you perform, no matter what, whether it's dance or whatever, drama, it's, I have not found any differences, no.
Is there any maybe stage persona, or you see them being more open on stage than in person, than maybe reserved? You've never noticed?
No, I found that the greatest musicians were the easiest ones to work with, believe it or not. The ones who thought they were so good were very demanding, sometimes very difficult to work with, but the ones who were really fine players were very kind, open, would allow you to make a mistake and they would help you, correct it. I can't say I really had any. The only tough thing, and I really shouldn't say this, sometimes it's difficult working with vocalists, and particularly female vocalists. They're more demanding, generally. You've heard the word diva.
Yeah.
Some of them are divas, and they're very, very difficult to work with. So if I had any problems at all throughout my career, it would be in that situation, which generally are easily resolved once you sit down and talk about it. That would be the only situation where you find that they're difficult to work with.
No, I have found, listening or playing with other musicians, the expression I'll use sometimes, I'll say, that person plays their personality. If they're hyper, the tendency to rush.
Can't hide it. You can't hide it.
They play their personalities, and talk about being more open on when performing. Just being open. When I was growing up, I was really painfully shy, and I started playing the instrument, and it brought me out of my shyness.
Yeah, it's an out for a lot of people. It's a way
Yes.
to, like I said, to develop self-worth, self-esteem. Very important.
I mean, I still practice because of the type of music I do. It's a lot of reading, big bands, orchestral, and because I'm not playing a lot, it requires me to practice more diligently. And I had to come up with a way to what's going to get me to practice more. It's just I started going back, and I said, well, these things I thought I used to play well, let me see if I can play them even better. What I've noticed, unfortunately, I rarely get headaches. But the few times if I've ever gotten one, when I start to practice, it goes away.
Because everyone else had headache, that's the
Yes,
problem.
that's what I do. No, but he's right there. No, but I find it's like a release. Very rewarding. There's nothing like it, really.
No questions?
Yes.
I'm a musician myself, and I played in the band in high school.
What did you play? What do you play?
I play bass guitar.
Okay.
I also play keyboard and percussion instruments. In my band, I played bass. So
What high school did you go to?
Steiner, Thompson East High School.
And who was your teacher?
Michael Ann Sweeney and Stephanie Gentile.
Were you involved with choir at all?
I was in, not choir, my friend was in the choir, but I was in the marching band and jazz band concert.
Okay.
And I would agree that it does have the power to improve the sound, and it takes a lot of discipline.
Yes, indeed.
And I'd also argue that maybe it can improve the community and help others and people together. Would you say there's any improvement maybe in how music power can improve communities over the years? There's a presence of musical benefits now. Was that around when you guys were younger maybe, or was that sort of a newer thing?
What is it called?
Musical benefits, where you just raise money using music. for
Oh,
charities.
yeah, there was some of that going on, but as Gil said, more importantly, you talk about community. The community had a number of bands and orchestras.
Yes.
So you had a sense of commitment to the community because you would play, you didn't get paid to do this. And they would do concerts and summer concerts, they would do parades, and it brought people together and developed a sense of community. Yes.
At one time, the American Federation of Musicians, they had the American Performance, the Music Performance Trust Fund, which allocated the next amount of money to each particular local to provide money for the use to perform concerts or other types of situations, open and free to the public. They paid for it. And that allowed the municipalities to have summer concert series. But that money, because that money was derived from the record sale of over-the-counter records, when people used to buy records like that. Since that is diminished, like I said, with the MP3s and everything, the amount of money isn't there anymore. But there is still some money. But what stopped that was the municipalities. What happened was with the reduction of money from record sales, less money, it became necessary that the municipalities pay part of it, some share of it. And then, with the economy, really went bad, the municipalities stopped the concerts. And that provided people used to go to those concerts, Sunday concerts, whatever, that do very well.
It always comes back to funding.
And there were all kinds of concerts, all kinds of music. It wasn't just one particular kind of music.
But funding for the arts on the federal level,
No,
state
no,
level,
no.
diminished.
Now, where I live in Hamilton Township, there's this one man, I don't know what he does, but he does a thing where we used to play live concerts, Cruiser Park. He does them in the summertime, and he sings along with tracks.
Yeah,
So
it's technology.
technology. There's an example, the musicians, there's the karaoke. Now with karaoke, not only don't professional musicians play, professional singers don't sing. Just whoever sits at the bar.
I think the word karaoke in Japanese, some of you should check that. It means singing out of tune. I'm serious. I think someone said that. I have to check that out.
The students, we have watched some of the news reports about the condition of Trenton High School and about why it's gotten to a point now where they're talking, it has to be demolished. Did you experience some of that physical deterioration?
Yes.
Mr. Grice.
Yes, I experienced that deterioration.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, the building was opened up January 4th, 1932. It was built by the Work Progress Administration. Magnificent building that was not maintained properly. If you don't maintain a building, facility, you lose it. And that's what happened at Trenton Central High School. This was not properly maintained. Leaky roofs, bad plumbing, bad electrical, et cetera, et cetera. Bricks and mortar were there, that was all in place, but the infrastructure of the school was just deteriorated to the point where it could not be repaired. And you couldn't retrofit it with new technology. It was difficult even getting wiring in there for computers because you couldn't get through the walls. They weren't like these walls. I mean, you had solid masonry walls, and it was very difficult. You couldn't do air conditioning, so it just got to the point where it's cost prohibitive to try and retrofit. And as I said, the maintenance was not there, and it got to the point where it destroyed. Bless you.
Unfortunately, also was when they first started talking about doing renovations and upgrading and everything, because of, I guess, politics had a lot to do with it, what to do and build a new one. And the initial cost, if they had done it, with the initial cost, it would have been so much cheaper to do it. But after a while, it took so many years, the cost became astronomical because the government not doing anything in a timely manner.
I just wanted to introduce the students to Mr. Tommy Grice, about whom you have studied, and I wanted to give them a chance to ask you some questions. And actually, if I could ask the first one, could you tell us when did you first come to teach in Trenton? Do you remember what year it was?
I have to think about that.
I do.
It was in the 50s.
Okay.
I think
58?
58, 1958.
Yes.
Okay. So, come on.
Where did you grow up?
Where did I grow up?
Yeah.
I grew up in Pensacola, Florida, on the Panhandle, right on the Gulf of Mexico. I sure miss it in the wintertime.
Yeah.
Now, growing up in a different area, a different part of the country than Mr. Passarella and Mr. Toad, do you feel, what kind of musical upbringing did you have? What kind of influences did you have?
I beg your pardon?
Coming from Florida, did that, you think, change your musical upbringing in comparison to the other gentlemen?
I'm trying to think about how to answer that question. I came from, went from Florida into Ohio. Musically, that's what you're talking about? Mm-hmm. No, I found on the level of music, it was the same. It was we had more places to perform, but the performance level of the musicians was, I found in Florida was higher than that in Ohio. We had better equipped. when I say equipped, theoretical. Theory, harmony, more prepared in the fundamentals rather than just producing. Most of the musicians that, even in New York, in comparison, Philadelphia, I play a lot in Philadelphia and play a lot in New York, but I respect the Philadelphia musicians more. Actually, I'm afraid most times to perform in Philadelphia, because they're so critical and they are highly trained, more so than the New York musicians. I guess you got so many musicians in New York City that they coming from migrate to New York, so many places. So you find so many on different levels. But the audience frightened to me in Philadelphia. It was the same way in Pensacola. They're very critical. Did that answer your question?
I guess so. I mean, what kind of music did you grow up with, though, living in Florida?
Well, I grew up with classical and religious music. I came from a very religious family, and we wasn't allowed to even play cards, dominoes, or anything, and we wasn't allowed to listen to anything but marches and folk music. And jazz to my mother, my father died when I was a year and a half. And playing jazz, just to mention the word jazz, they was thinking about the demeanor or the conduct of a jazz musician. They didn't realize that they looked beyond the music and saw its conduct. So my mother said, no, 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 no. So everything was centered around religious, sacred music and classical music. I wasn't introduced to jazz music until I got to the high school. I'd sneak around that to get into that.
But your brother was a jazz musician.
Beg your pardon?
Your brother was a jazz musician?
Yes, Gigi?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. But we went the same trail. He couldn't play. We had to play secret. We had to hide our instruments and play William Tell or something instead of bebop. Till we got to school. But it was a no-no thing in my we had certain rules and regulations my mother thought that, and we had to abide by that.
How did you come to teach in Trenton?
I found a prince when I went to Ohio to go to school. And I found the prince and she brought me here to Trenton. I was on my way to New York for my Columbia teaching college. And she happened to be from Trenton. So we had, as the musicians say, we had hooked up before. But I fell in love with a young lady. I called her my princess. She bought me the princess.
Where did you live when you came to teach in Trenton?
I lived in Trenton. I lived on Montgomery Place, right off of State Street. That's in the west portion of Trenton. And then we moved from there. I bought a home. My first home was bought on Alden Avenue off of near the reservoir. And then I built a home out in Newark. And then I moved from there. I lost a son who was a lawyer. And I moved on Green Lane. And then after losing him, I moved to Lawrence, is where I am now.
And I'm asking questions quickly because our time is short and there were certain things we talked about that we wanted to make sure that we got in. One of the things that Mr. Passarella mentioned and students know about in their readings was that there was a lot of residential segregation, that people kind of stuck in their own neighborhoods, and so that's one of the reasons we were wondering, about where you lived and how easy it was for you to move around.
And even in Pensacola, Florida, I had to walk 4 blocks to see a face like mine. I was born in a white neighborhood. And I was the youngest person in that neighborhood. And I was accountable in that neighborhood. I never faced racism the whole time I was in Pensacola.
Probably more of a problem here in Trenton, I would think.
Yeah. Because I had come from school. I had to report to a lady and her husband who owned a grocery store. They took care of me, and they were white until my mother came from work. And we had more than one parent when I grew up. Anyone caught you doing something wrong, they was entitled to put a little paddle on you. They disciplined you. And that's how it was. I think I slept at everybody's house, being I was 4. I was the youngest person in the neighborhood. So I enjoyed my, I didn't run into that.
And you, how did you come to, you first taught in the middle school?
I taught in the junior high school level. No, I took a job in, they held me over in 3rd grade. The 3rd grade until they found a place in the junior high school for me as a musician.
But you substituted first, did you not?
I substituted.
Yeah, 'cause that's where I met.
Yeah, I substituted.
Okay.
He was one of my students.
Yes, yes indeed.
And you, but Mr. Passarella, you told me that your first encounter with Mr. Grice wasn't very
Well, you
pleasant.
mentioned Gigi Grice, and as a young kid interested in jazz, I knew that name. It was a legend. It was spelled differently, Gryce.
Yeah.
So when Mr. Grice came in.
Don't ask me why he spelled it that way.
So
I guess he wanted to be.
when he came into the music theory class as a substitute, I was 15 years old. It was 1958. That's why I remember it so well. Came up to the board. He put his name on the blackboard. You know, my name is. You know how you give substitutes a hard time to begin with. And I knew all there was to know. You couldn't tell me anything. I was 15. I knew it all. So he put his name on the board. My name is Mr. Grice. And I put my hand up and I said, I probably just shouted out. I probably didn't put my hand up. I said, are you related to Gigi Grice? I just want to let him know I knew somebody who's in jazz. He said, yeah, it's my brother. And he kept on going. I said, that's not your brother. And we had this big argument. And he kept saying, it's my brother. I said, it can't be your brother. He said, it's my brother. Well, obviously it was. And that's when we developed our friendship from '58. And I was just a student.
Just a couple questions about some of the students that you've had. We've talked about Sarah Dash and Nona Hendricks. Could you talk about them as students a little bit?
I beg your pardon?
Can you speak about some of the students that you worked with, like Sarah Dash, for example?
At Trenton High?
I didn't work with Sarah at Trenton High.
You did.
Did you work with Sarah Dash at all at Trenton High?
Oh, I know. I worked with Sarah. I taught Sarah.
Yes.
Right, outside.
In middle school,
Yes.
junior 5.
Right.
Yes.
And she was in my class. And one day, the principal called me and on a Friday afternoon and told me that I had to be chaperone some girls, stay in the class while they practice. And I said, that's after 3 o'clock. He said, well, what are you saying? That was a principal, Katz.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, do I get paid? He said, I remind you, Mr. Grice, you are on a salary, not wages. I can call you in on a Sunday, actually, to make you teach. So I chaperoned these girls, and I think it was Nona Hendricks, a girl from Philadelphia.
Patricia Holt.
Beg your pardon?
Patricia Holt.
No,
Patty
it was
LaBelle?
the
Cindy
one that
Herzog?
really became
Patty
famous.
LaBelle.
Patty LaBelle.
Yeah. I don't know.
And Cindy LeBlanc. That was it.
Oh,
Cindy
okay.
from Camden. So I had to stay from them with them for about 2 hours while they practiced. And that's how but I had Sarah in my class.
She said,
I just got off.
she said you made her learn to play an instrument.
I made her play cello.
Okay. Clifford Adams.
He
We can go on and on.
didn't play trombone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just mentioned him because he credits the three of you with starting his career.
Yeah.
Well, he credited him. Our time is short, so any last comments that you want to make? And I'm so sorry we didn't get.
Well, I had a partner,
Yeah.
so I couldn't be here.
Any last comments, last questions?
I guess this question goes for all of you. If you didn't have a career in music, where do you think you would have ended up?
Grice, where do you think? Where would you end up if you didn't do music?
I don't know, because it was 9 of us in my family, and I'm the youngest, and all of them became teachers. So I know where I would probably end up, either teaching or on the streets.
That's exactly.
You know, my mother just said, always said, I expect the best, and that was it. Economically, I was not ready to be a teacher. It was a struggle, but I just had that in my mind that I couldn't let the family down. I had to prepare myself to be a teacher.
Same with me, but you know, back in those days, my first year teaching, my salary was $5,000.
That's right.
There was no
Mine
money.
was
There was
less.
no money in teaching. I didn't know what else to do. If you say, you know, what else would you have done? I had no idea. I just knew that's the only thing I had an interest in that was fairly good at was music. So I had no choice, either pursue that or go out in the streets and figure it out. Go to work in a factory. As Gil said, in those days you can walk out of high school and get a job in any factory.
Well, in Trenton,
Made
yeah,
good money.
always really good.
Absolutely.
But are they planning to be, how many plan to become teachers?
Okay.
Oh, I'm so sorry to see your hand. Because, you know, we need teachers.
We do sure do.
We need teachers. And to me, teaching became addictive. We didn't have hours. He and I taught
We taught together, same room.
You taught until, and I was always pulled into the office, the principal's office. I was always late sending the kids to the other classes. My job was to teach. I never called the roll. I told the kids, they said, when do you call? I said, when you're absent. That's when I called the roll. But I taught until I could get my prayer calls.
And never took a lunch.
That's right, never took a lunch. Just taught.
Right through the whole.
Yeah, I would eat right in front of the class.
That's right.
And while I was teaching. But we need teachers. We need teachers.
I'll tell you one thing. Teachers. To this day, and Tom knows this, there are maybe 2 or 3 teachers that stick in my mind. The impact they had on me in so many different ways. It's like, I remember it were yesterday, and some of them, one particularly, my English teacher, she was tough on me. She wouldn't give me any slack, and you know what? At the time I sat there, and she made me realize, I was sitting one day and said, she's right and I'm wrong. But that's the impact she had on me. Mrs. Hunt, she taught me English at Trenton High. I mean, she just, and my music teacher, they were just, that's the impact you can have on your students.
I bet you they can say the same thing. I'm sure you've all had teachers that really impacted you, and you remember them for a while.
But the reason I'm bringing this up is at the age we are, to be able to, me especially, to be able to say, to this day, I revere them so highly because of the impact they had on my life.
And there's one that had an impact on my life and still does every day. Every day.
So it's an honorable profession, should be proud.
And I'm now officially the teacher who's late sending the students to the
Oh,
next
I'm
class.
sorry.
So
Okay.
I thank you so much. Thank you all.